Hi, and welcome to the meeting of the Town of Corte Madera Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We're going to get rolling. Wow, it's not on the agenda, but let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, because we always do. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So we're going to begin with open time for the public, and this is for items that are not on the agenda. There's copies of the agenda, I believe, back there. So if you have something that's not on the agenda and you'd like to bring it up, now's the time to do so. I'm going to ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if you can give your name, that'd be great. Cindy, thank you.
I just wanted to tell everybody that once the curb cut out where Lucky Drive, turns into Orange Drive, near River High School, will be installed. It is in writing on an official document. And the rest of other curb cutouts is kind of vague, but DPW.
Microphone.
That's better, thank you. Yeah, DPW has hired a consultant who's going to go around and check all the curb cutouts that exist and how they comport with LiDAR, which is pretty out in the modern world now. And then there will be some other places that need curb cutouts. So I expect in a couple of years, Larkspur will have a good curb cutout system for the ADA as well as for cyclists.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Jim Robinson. I just wanted to thank, unfortunately our Public Works Director is not here tonight, but him as well as our manager and also the chair of our committee tonight, AKA Council Member Bob Ravazio, for their efforts in getting our permit parking program together for Redwood High School. We discussed this as a committee some time ago regarding the concerns that some of the residents had about the parking that you all heard probably quite a bit about. But I think that this will go a long way if properly implemented and enforced to help alleviate some of the pedestrian and bicycle hazards that have existed as a result of having 40 or 50 cars coming into Apache and Lakeside and Bird. So appreciate the efforts of our council member and this committee and our staff for implementing that program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
Hi, Pat Ravazio, 427 Oakdale Avenue. I just want to give you a quick unofficial update. I had a conversation with the one of the principals at Skidmore Owings in Merrill, which designed the pedestrian overcrossing at Tamalpais. And I did hear that Caltrans has created a bucket for it, that it is an official project at Caltrans. We're trying to get some kind of official word or statement out of them, but I just want this group to know that this group gets total credit for that because it happened at that brainstorm session that we had publicly where we all came up with the the ideas. Anyway, I just want to say if any of you are not familiar with the project, it is on your website at the Bike and Pedestrian Committee meeting. And if you guys want to promote it and get sort of your higher-ups friends in transportation to put in a good word with Caltrans or something, we might be able to move it along a little faster, which would be great for me and for all of us, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Can I have a second bite?
Sure.
This is more good news, Cindy Winter again. The path along the US 101 northbound off-ramp that goes to East Sir Francis Drake, that very narrow path, has cleared all bureaucratic obstacles. It is go. How fast it will go sort of depends on various Caltrans and TAM arrangements, but it will happen soon. And the people who live over there are ecstatic. So I think Corte Maderans will be too, that's all.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Please? Do you know, Cindy, offhand, what the width of the path will be?
I think it's going to be 12 feet,
Yeah.
but I would recommend that you go online. Tam has a website. It's a bit difficult to find,
Yeah.
but it's there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we will close open time and we'll go to committee member reports. Are there any members of the BPAC that have a report?
Pass.
Pass, pass. Another pass?
Another pass.
Another pass. So I'll just circle back, and yes, the council last week, I believe 2 weeks ago, passed permit parking in sections of Madera Gardens nearest Redwood High School with a lot of community input, but we're going to be trying to start it up as quickly as we possibly can because kids from Redwood High School were parking in the neighborhood and then coming out at lunchtime, jumping in their cars, heading out, getting something to eat, and driving back and parking in the neighborhood. And it was causing, besides taking up a lot of spaces, there were a lot of complaints that kids were driving fast, and it was a dangerous situation. So we've been working closely with Redwood High School, as well as the neighborhood and the community in developing this plan. So hopefully it'll be an improvement. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So now we're going to move on to project updates and discussion. Sanford Casa Buena intersection improvement, paving complete. Jared.
Thank you, Chair Ravazio. So, yeah, I just wanted to give some updates here about the Sanford Casa Buena traffic congestion relief project that I'm confident most of you are aware that it has been discussed at previous BPAC meetings and council meetings, and we're happy to report some progress on this. So here you have the intersection as you used to know it, and as of this week, we've done some night paving work, grinding and paving. So if you drive it today, you'll notice the intersection of Sanford and Casa Buena has been repaved, as well as Casa Buena as you travel from this intersection east down to the dealerships. So construction is almost complete. All the concrete flat work has been installed. New drainage in the area in some locations has been installed. Several new curb ramps and pedestrian crossings. So we're happy for the improvements, and it's almost done. Striping and signage is going to be installed in about a week, and that'll be the last item for this project. So happy to see this one go to completion. And I'll just go through these, and I'll pause after each.
Let's just
We
do
can
Can I
questions.
make a comment?
Yeah, please.
Let's do,
Particularly,
you know what, we're going to do questions first. So do you
Oh,
have a
okay.
question? Any questions?
okay, I'll make it in terms of a question. Is there plans to put when you go southbound on Sanford, the lane narrows quite a bit going southbound, and a cyclist will have to safely negotiate that, really control the lane. Is there plans to stripe or put a shared lane marker in that place?
We don't have a plan, but I'm going to add that as a note because I like the thought there. It's about a 13-foot wide from curb to curb, face of curb to face of curb. So it is a short stretch. I don't know if a signage or striping would be the best, but I'll discuss that with the director and
Yeah,
look into something
I
like
think
that. Okay,
you understand my thinking.
I do, yeah.
And I heard we had some people who were completely ignoring the sign and were going through the intersection anyway, but apparently CMPA has been assisting in talking to them.
Yeah. No, we have had multiple complaints, and I've witnessed it, and it's been brought to my attention several times that motorists come to the intersection trying to approach northbound Sanford, and now it's closed off, and there have been temporary do not enter signs, and they've just proceeded through unsafely the wrong way down the one way. There was a large arrow temporarily installed pointing southbound. So we figured there was plenty of signage, but yeah, there were some failures to properly drive that. And when we did contact Chief Norton and CMPA, and he sent some people out to look.
Thanks. Okay, so there's no action. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's the
Another
expected
question.
completion date?
It would be the striping and signage is the last step, and we're looking at next week. There's a few days once they get the tracking down that Public Works will review it and confirm that it's per plan. Then they'll go and lay the permanent striping. So, a week.
Great, thanks. So we're not taking any action on this, but if there's a member of the public who wishes to comment on this? Again, I ask you to limit your time on this to 3 minutes, please.
Steve Lamb, San Anselmo. Yes, I got to experience that today. I got off the bus and walked behind the bus shelter to cross the street to go to Pete's, and there was a crosswalk waiting for me. It's very nice. I checked it out and looked around, and I think it's a great improvement. I'd like to thank everyone involved who brought this about, the committee, the Public Works group, and I did observe that people still don't quite get the idea of what the red octagonal sign means, but I think it's a great improvement. One guy at the piece, one of the workers, did comment that he didn't like he didn't care for the one-way piece. And I told him that in a year, he would come to love it.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Donati, and I live here in Corte Madera. And I didn't realize that all this was going on. And I use the library a lot, and I live, up here. So I was used to always negotiating that very difficult, making the left turn onto Tamalpais. And when I saw that it was painted with the arrow only going the other way, I thought, well, where am I going to go left? So I drove down past the funeral home to make a left. It is very hard to see, to creep out to make a left there. And then I said, well, okay, I'll do it, but I don't feel very comfortable doing that. So I'm just wondering, if you're going to eliminate people from making the turn left, we need to have some safer options. So I don't know what you are thinking of doing. And then the other one is going through Pete's Coffee. That's the easiest thing, but that's not really right to do that. And then the last one is to go make a right from the library and then go left around onto Meadow Suite. So I did that today, and it's kind of far. So I'm coming up to Larkspur, but I have to go all the way down to the right, turn onto that road where there's a curve, and then I have people, barreling along, maybe coming from a nice lunch at Marin Joe's or something, and I'm making a left there, and it's also a little bit uncomfortable. So I just wanted to bring up that point and I know this is probably too late in the process, but, it would be good to think about the traffic options for those other left turns, because I think it's a little bit unsafe.
Thank you.
Patty Stolier, Casa Buena Drive. It's been since 1984, but you guys fixed Sanford, so thank you, thank you, thank you. All things come to those who wait. I really appreciate that Sanford is so much better. One question I had was, if you're coming down Casa Buena and you want to go to the Bank of America, can you go straight across, or you can't go the back way because that's the exit of the bank? So I wasn't sure. It looked like the options were turn right or turn left, but there was no go straight. So that was a question. And then the only comment was my 48-year-old daughter came over for the first time since that's been done. She lives in the peninsula. She grew up in Corte Madera, and she said it was the happiest day of her life to see that Sanford has been fixed. So thank you for that.
Okay. If there's anybody else who wants to speak, if you can line up behind the microphone so we can keep this rolling, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Linda Brune. I live in Corte Madera on this side and near Sylvia. Same thing. I think there was no notification for residents, and while the work was going on, there were no signs that said detour, and there's still no signs that say detour. So, we live here, so we know how to get around, but if you're just going to the library or somebody's not familiar with the area, they have no idea, which is probably why people are still trying to go the wrong way, because there's no signage that says you need to now go down what is it, Meadow Suite to the other street, there's nothing. So you can also have to look at, like Sylvia said, a stop sign or something along coming from Marin Joe's. I ride my bike to Mill Valley for work often, and just it's going to be tricky. So getting across Tamalpais, I almost got hit by a car just now, just coming across, even though that light was flashing. Car came through probably going 50 miles an hour. So making a left without any stoppage with the high-speed traffic is going to be, you're going to eliminate one problem, but I see that there's going to be more problems in other areas because of that. So something to look into.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then we're going to close public comment. Jared, you look like you want to say something, so let's start with you.
Thank you.
Then we'll bring it back to the BPAC.
So a couple of points that I want to respond to. So Linda, you mentioned about the temporary signage. That is something that we're looking at doing on just some temporary barricades around Meadow Suite for people coming down Meadow Suite, instructing them to continue on to Connow to get around, and then people coming out of the library, out of the apartments, just to have a little bit more signage and notification of where to go, what to do. Just for the next, a couple months, we feel that there's value there until people start to learn the intersection and how to navigate it. And then coming from, say, the library, we kind of looked at it as there's two options. You can go right and go eastbound down Meadow Suite to Connow, and then you approach Casa Buena intersection. And what we've had part of this construction project for that intersection right there is we've pulled the stop bar. It used to be a yield-controlled intersection, but we've pulled the stop bar a little bit closer to the intersection to bring cars' nose a little bit further up, and visibility toward Marin Joe's is increased a little bit. So we're going to start with that and keep a monitor on that intersection and look at then the approaching westbound Casa Buena traffic, seeing if there's any advanced warning signs, intersection ahead, et cetera, that can be done. But yeah, we're gonna start with that stop bar increased up there. So that's the right out of the library to Connow. So going left out of the library to Lakeside is another option. And during peak hour traffic, the morning commute or the evening commute, that left-hand turn is a challenge onto and through Tamalpais. So taking a right onto Tamalpais is pretty easy at that point. However, going left, as you've pointed out, is a little difficult to negotiate. Another third option is going up another intersection past the Daphne Funeral Home, and it's a right-hand only enter onto Tamalpais, and it puts you eastbound onto Tamalpais, but it's a pretty fluid movement, and you can then merge across to the left-hand turn pocket. It's a protected left-hand turn, and then you can enter into Lakeside if that's where you're headed to the town center or something. And then, as Patty pointed out, the Bank of America is accessible off of Casa Buena, so you can go straight on through. You do have to check that oncoming traffic is not coming, because they would have the right of way before your left-hand turn. So yeah, that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Any comments from the BPAC?
Questions or comments?
We can do either. You can do either one. Whatever you want to do.
Neither, but I'm just judging the process.
We're supposed to be with comments, but if you have another question that's come up. Yeah, I just wanted to say, so just point of information, we have been talking about this for a while, months, and that is, I believe it was the most dangerous intersection in town from accident standpoint, and we had to do something, which is why we made the changes that we did. And I will just say, personally, I actually got to go through it a couple weeks ago, about a week or two ago, actually, and it was great. Not having to worry about cars coming down off there when I was trying to get on the Tamalpais and make that right. It's fantastic. So anyway, thank you. Hopefully it will settle down over time and we'll get used to it. But we have been talking about this for a while. Yes.
May I request,
Please.
I don't know how we do this, but, or motion, but can we
Get to the
request that?
microphone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. May we request that you come back with a report after, let's say, 6 months to see how this goes?
Sure.
Yeah, good.
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. grants submittal update. Jared,
All
you're up
right.
again.
Excellent. So Public Works has been pretty busy of recent putting together some grant applications for several projects that we have, some of which are in our current capital improvement program, and some others have been recently discussed and we feel have merit to proceed with grant applications. So I'll start out with the TFCA grant. That's the Transportation for Clean Air Act, and the one we thought would be a good candidate is the Casa Buena Complete Streets, which this is a new Class 2 and Class 3 introduction of bike lanes for Casa Buena between Connow, which is at the left, upper left, that intersection, all the way down as you move to the right or south on Casa Buena down to the 101 entrance ramp. So we're looking at restriping the road, repaving the road, adding sidewalks on the west side, which is the kind of the bottom side of Casa Buena as you see it there, and a Class 2 in the southbound direction, and a Class 3 with sharrows in the northbound direction. So the construction estimate originally came in at 2.7 million. So it's a pretty long corridor there. It's a lot of pavement, a lot of sidewalk, and a lot of work to do. That's why the cost is what it is. And originally, we haven't received any secured grant funding to date, but we're happy to announce that we feel that this is a good candidate for TFCA funds. So we are currently requesting, we'll be submitting tomorrow actually, for a $416,000 grant on this project, which it also is important to note that the town funding versus the grant allocation is a good merit in the application process, and that the town funded portion for this is about 85%.
Why don't we stop for a second then? Any questions from BPAC?
Not for me.
Sure. Okay.
You're going to, we've discussed this and design factors previously, so when, before construction, will it come back to the BPAC at all, or come back to the public?
Yes, it'll come back. Currently, this is not slated for construction in the near term. I think there was a council meeting in January that we discussed project priorities, and I think this was on, I don't remember exactly, I think 4 years or so out, and that could get pulled a little bit forward if we have some grant funding, but it's still a little ways out from construction, so we'll be coming back before construction to BPAC, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions on this particular project? Okay, did you want to do the Redwood Highway and then we'll maybe take public comment?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So another grant that we're seeking is the TDA grant, and this is specific to pedestrians and cyclists in the area, and we feel the Redwood Highway Path project, we've already secured TDA grant funding for a couple of years ago, I believe, to contribute for this, and a new cycle of grant funding has come available, so we're going to seek some more. I think the grant that we secured, well, I'll get to that in a second. Real quickly, the project, as most of you guys are aware, is the 8-foot wide Class 1 path that goes from Warnham Drive along Redwood Highway down to San Clemente Drive. In the bottom left picture is a recent spray paint by some public works staff on the ground to help highlight the route cracking and uplifting of the pavement. But you can see there that's the path that we're talking about, and the project's going to consist of new curb ramps wherever the path intersects with curb ramps and crosswalks. New pavement surface for the whole thing, tree removal where the trees are causing conflict, replanting with a more appropriate species, and adding a buffer zone on each side. As you can see, the current path doesn't have any Class 1 buffers on the side, recovery zones. So that's going to be introduced into the project as well. But as far as the grant funding goes, the project is about a $1.1 million project from start to finish. And we've already secured $97,000, of which we spent about $55,000 in design fees. And we're requesting an additional $311,000, which makes the town-funded portion about 63%, which we feel should compete pretty well.
Okay, questions from Deepak? Yeah.
I rode that area today and on the street actually, and some of the tree damage is not only on the path but on the street. So I'm wondering about if and when that would be addressed. And more importantly, I think in terms of the path and its usage by students is currently when it passes Shorebird Marsh, there's a parking lot for people driving in to observe at the marsh, and the path is essentially goes right through that parking area behind the cars. So people park, and I can just imagine kids rushing to school or not paying attention, and someone leaving, leaving their parking space, backing out into a cyclist or person walking. So I'm wondering if there's, if that could be addressed.
Yeah, I'll take a note of that, possibly a advanced warning sign on the path, and maybe some notes into the parking lot as well, signage, crossing path behind you, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to be paternalistic and just prevent people from going straight through and have them go around.
So rerouting the path around the parking lot?
Rerouting the path around. I think that would be the safest thing, but I know there'll be a contingent that wouldn't like that.
I'll wait for the comment period.
Okay.
There should be some warning.
Kirby's going to wait for the comment period.
But I
on
do have
that
a
one.
question for the
But he has a question. Okay, roll.
Are the lines in there, the dark lines on the map above, is that where it is anticipated the replacement path will be? Or is that the lines of the existing path?
So in the ghosted aerial photo you're talking about?
Yeah.
The darker lines are the recovery zone. It's above and below. It's a 2-foot shoulder. Is that, I think?
Because I just want to ask if something I requested like a year ago about this section, because I jog it and live near here. This area right here, so I guess I'll phrase it in the form of a question.
Go right ahead.
Will this area, this path, be moved away from the crosswalk area? Because you can imagine when people stand there waiting for a crosswalk, pile up, which happens, and then bicycles will want to come through, or joggers want to come through, like me, and there's a pile of people, and it creates, like you would think that this part of the path would move away, so there's a gathering spot at the crosswalk. Is that in the plans?
Okay, yeah, so I understand what you're saying. We went out and looked at it. The plans have not been adjusted. We looked at 2 options. One was a bulb out to allow the peds to congregate away from the path. The travel lane is about 24 inches away from the current face of curb. So the bulb out would be a very shallow bulb out, and it would completely take away the shoulder. It would be right up against the travel lane. We felt that wasn't the best. We looked at the other direction of taking the path and pushing it out. There's a couple bushes and trees that are right on the shoulder of a bank right there. So it would be pretty tough, not to say it can't be done, but it'd be pretty tough to push the path at that specific location. It would probably need a retaining element to get the path further out, and it is pretty close. It's nearing the edge of the bank. So those are a couple things. We haven't completely exhausted that as a possibility. I do just recall spending some specific time at that one area. Were there other crossings that also come to mind other than that one?
All the crossings are like that.
Okay.
Because the path now, it kind of assumes you want to cross the street, and it actually goes closer to the sidewalk at the crosswalk, and then comes back out. Not the
Okay.
new one with the gravel parking lot, or the new parking lot, but the other,
Okay.
the one closer to the north.
Okay.
Any other questions from BPAC?
Yeah, I have a question for Cheryl, actually.
Okay.
How,
That's your microphone.
oh, sorry, yeah, I forget. How extensive is the damage to the road path from the trees, not the path?
The damage on the road, as I
Yeah.
rode past it and over it, I thought it would be annoying for motor vehicle drivers, but I think of it as actually dangerous for cyclists who are on the road because the pavement is dark. When I went through, it was noonish, there wasn't any shadow, so it was, unless you were really looking at the pavement, it would be a surprise. And it'd be enough that if your hands weren't on the handlebars well, you'd be thrown off.
Okay.
They're pretty big.
Any other questions from the VPAC? Okay, then we'll open it up for public comment. Is there a member of the public who wishes to comment on these two grant applications? Okay. Hearing none. Oh, okay, please, if you can line up behind the microphone, that'd be great. Thank you.
This is Jean Severinghouse. Good evening. I have had problems both in a car and as a pedestrian on the crossing of the Shorebird Marsh viewing area. So, and I would not suggest signs of any sort. I would suggest either a really big crosswalk painted into it, or would you consider a table, like a speed table? So the crosswalk is raised so that people backing up have to think about getting up onto the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Hey, Jean.
Yeah.
Janet Furman, Corte Madera. I'm wondering about the ramp at the intersection of the path at San Clemente. That was recently rebuilt, and it's kind of, in my view, was built in a way that might work for somebody in a wheelchair, but not work very well for somebody on a bicycle. There are two very narrow ramps at right angles to each other. I would so much rather see one really wide ramp at the end where a bike path intersects a road, and that's a place where you could be coming in either direction on the bike path and then want to cross over to the village to where Macy's is. And with those ramps being so narrow, it's just really awkward. So I'm wondering if that work, which was just finished in the last year, is going to be ripped out and done differently now.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, hearing none, we will bring it back to the BPAC for comments. Jared, do you have any kind of response? Go ahead. Oh, look like you're...
Yeah, thank you. So, Gene, I like those ideas, and I'm taking note of those, the Conti Cross or the speed table. And then, Janet, the ramp that you're speaking of, I believe that's current ADA design to direct pedestrians out into the crossing, and the directional ramps. The sweeping ramp has a little bit more implication that the pedestrian can cross at any degree of angle, and we try to avoid that whenever possible and feasible, to sending a pedestrian out into the diagonal or middle of the intersection. And then there are no plans of ripping that one out, although I will bring this up to R.J. Suko, who did design and implement that for construction, and I'll pass on the notes that you have, just so he's aware.
Thank you. Any comments from BPAC? Yes, Kirby.
As someone who runs through that little viewing area of the marsh, 2 points. One, I love the suggestion you made on elevating the path, because two, I would never go around. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I'm just calling it as I see it. Right. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So anyway, those are my 2 comments.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. So, looks like we have more applications. Jared?
Yeah, thank you. So another pool of applications that we're also cooking up are the Safe Pathways grants. These are projects that are improvements to paths for kids, for children, going to and from school, heading home after school, and going to school on the way in the morning. So these projects are not currently in our council-approved capital improvement program. So that's kind of what we're here tonight to do, is present these and request feedback. Maybe you guys have some ideas. These are just concepts. They've been mostly discussed at our Safe Routes to Schools meetings, but we're going to try to apply for some grant funding for these via the Safe Pathways grant program. So should I go through all three of them and then we can talk, or should we do one at a time?
If you're looking for feedback, let's just do one at a time.
Okay.
Probably,
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks.
So the first one is the Larkspur Class 1 path, the Hart Street connector. So on the bottom left, it's kind of hard to see from far away, but let's see if the laser pointer works. No, I don't have a laser. Oh, here we go. So here's Town Park. Here's Tamalpais Drive as it bends around in Magnolia. This is the Larkspur Class 1 path all the way up here as it turns to Sandra Marker along here. So the connector that we're looking at is this little connection right here. It's a dirt connector, easy to miss. As you're going south on the Larkspur path, it's a left-hand turn down a relatively steep dirt embankment, cutting through some bushes, and it dumps you out onto Hart Street, which maybe you don't know is called Hart Street. It's a gravel road, and then it's very short. It's about 80 feet, and then it hits Palm right back here that runs over here. So this little connector is what we're looking at, and that's what's zoomed in right here. This is north on the Larkspur path. This is that small dirt connector here, and then this is Hart Street. So this has been discussed as being unsafe, being steep, being difficult to navigate, especially in the wet weather. It's currently dirt gravel, and then this is gravel down here in rock. So what we've started looking at is it's a pretty large drop in grade. This is about 10 feet difference from up here to down here. So to really get an ADA ramp or ADA accessible path up to the bike path over there, we have to swing around pretty severely and then come on back. So this is about 200 feet at a 5% slope, which is about as steep as we can go. And this is all densely wooded and vegetated back here. So this is a pretty involved project, and at first glance we thought maybe we could just pave this, and that wasn't going to work. So we got to keep it accessible to all those persons, and then also we're looking at, well, maybe there's people walking that don't want to take this full route all the way around. So a staircase with a bike rental on the side for adventurous folk can make it up straight up. And then to further complicate this, there's a property line right here that the current path cuts, kind of dog ears that property. So the end result is to contain everything in the public right away and avoid the corner of this property. So that's the concept right here. Pre-Seed Transportation has helped to put this together for our grant application, and then they also helped out with some cost numbers for it. So it was pretty rough looking at it. It also includes the repaving of this section of Hart Street, not repaving, the paving of it, because it's currently gravel. And the reason there being that we're doing all this measure to eliminate a dirt section here. And why would we dump ADA or even cyclists or walkers back onto a muddy dirt road if we can avoid it? So included in this number here, this $500,000 construction estimate, is that pavement element. So it's nothing previously requested, this is a new project. So we're looking at the maximum allocation for the Safe Pathways funding, which is a $400,000 grant. So that the town would pick up the remaining $100,000, which was about a 20% town-funded portion. And then one other thing that, when I first looked at that cost estimate, was a little alarming, but makes a little bit more sense, is that the real steep slope that's encountered here, it really calls for some pretty severe retaining walls, and it's a lot of length of retaining walls. So that's really what's driving up quite a bit of the construction cost, retaining wall, the concrete retaining wall structure on this downslope side. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Any questions or comments or feedback?
Questions? Yes, go ahead. So,
on the ramp, you have the ramp. It's just under a ramp. It's not a ramp, right? You're at 5%.
Yes. Sorry.
But you still need to do retaining and perhaps a guardrail all along it. Have you looked at it to bring it up to a ramp at 1 and 12 instead of 1 and 20?
We haven't. That's an idea. I think there would be more landings, several more landings introduced. There's max runs for ramps before at that bigger slope, the 8%. But yeah, we can look at that.
Yeah,
just to shorten it down, keep the length.
Yeah, considerably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cheryl?
As I recall, it's even when you get on the gravel road portion, after you've taken the path and you're on the gravel, it's still downhill. And there's actually, I think, I don't recall the sight lines there, but I think that should be looked at, the sight lines and the grade of that gravel portion, and if that could be leveled out so that people aren't going downhill and accelerating as they come to the intersection. It's just a thought.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm really glad you're addressing this. So.
We are. Yeah. Thank you. The one trick there is there's a driveway garage on the. You're looking at the left-hand side of that Hart Street. So if we tried to level that road down, it would be, impacting that one driveway, and the road does wrap around. So it would be, I just see that as a little bit challenge to lower, because then you're now retained on the side, and then you have to pick the road back up to continue around. But the sight lines is something I haven't studied much, so I'll take note of that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Kirby.
How far does Hart Road go around there as a gravel? As somebody who takes the path, I never even noticed that the road turned, so I'm kind of curious where that road goes to.
It goes. I'm going to guess and say about a couple hundred feet. It's probably 3 or 4 times the length of the short portion of Hart. Goes, behind, just about to the end of the picture is what I would guess right there. It dies out. It dead ends there.
Any other questions? I had one. So that's 35 Palm. We used to actually own that, so I'm very familiar with that pathway. I guess my question is, how are you going to keep people from using that pathway? Because it's super heavily used right now. And how confident are you that that will be a well-used alternative? Because I know that is really heavily used right now, and this is going to be seen as like an extra couple 100 feet.
That's a great point. Originally, the solution was to send it up, I think a little bit more diagonal, but one straight run all the way out to here, and we thought that was not going to sell well for people wanting to go northbound on the trail, and people were just going to take the dirt connector. So one thing we did originally was to make it a switchback, so that at least the person is dumped out near where they start. But you're right, there would have to be some sort of barrier, some sort of elimination of that dirt connector. To really deter people from using it.
As Cindy always talks about, people will take the shortest, straightest line.
It's true.
This is going to, be seen as an extra jog around. Any other questions for BPAC? Okay, open up for public comment, if there's any.
Race.
Hi, Pat Ravazio again. Bob mentioned that we had been involved with this property, and what I'd like to say is that the person who bought that property would be, I think, very cooperative in allowing you to do something more off to the right. He is a real bike advocate, and one of the reasons why he bought the property is that he loved that it was on the bike path. And I understand that he also came to the town and offered to build a public restroom right there somewhere, because I guess a lot of people stop and go. And he is a man of means. I won't put his name out there publicly, but he's very well off, and he really loves biking, and I think he might be a real resource to, if not for his land, for his money. So I'm happy to facilitate anything that I can, but he loves bikes, and he loves the idea of being on the bike path, so I think you might have some real possibilities to just go a little bit more of a slope going that way, up toward the schools, because that's where the kids are coming to and from, right? They're going to school. Anyway, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Cindy Winter again. That dirt path is a kind of rite of passage for middle school boys on their smallish mountain bikes. And the problem is that people my age, or simply more prudent people of any age, don't dare use the path. And it would help a lot getting people to school. I was idly looking at Google Earth this morning, and I saw that Hart Street long ago was probably connected with Branch Street in Larkspur. And then the railroad came by and cut the communication off. And Branch Street is still there. And I was looking at Branch Street, and I noticed all these big white buildings on Magnolia Avenue. And I asked myself, what are those? It's a school. It has 375 students. It's a private school. Rumors are that it's a Christian school, but I didn't see anything like that on the website. It's Marin Primary.
Yeah.
And I think a safer path to get to that school would be helpful, as well as a safer path to Neil Cummins. It's Neil Cummins has 578 students, so it's a little larger. And then I was wondering, can public money be used to help students in a private school? Can we use that private school as an argument to help secure funding? I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And can I ask one more question?
Yes, we're going to deal with all the questions later. That's why we're,
Oh, I thought we were having questions
no, we're
now.
doing, this is public comment.
All
And
right.
If you want to ask a question, and we'll deal with it when it comes up. Thanks.
So Linda Bruin again, and I'm not, can I come up here and point, 'cause I'm not clear about this part.
Yeah, you need to take the mic with you because you're on TV.
So you said that's gonna be stairs? Because you wouldn't be able to ride a bike up the ramp. And right now, if you go up the ramp, you can go up and down the ramp on a bike. And I was just thinking about when my son, when I had him in a tandem, I wouldn't have been able to use either one of those options. For me, on a mountain bike, I'd have to get up and I'd have to walk either one. But you couldn't make that curve on the ramp on a bike. You couldn't ride your bike up the stairs or down the stairs. And if you have a child in a one of those
Cargo bike.
carts or a tandem thing, you couldn't use either option. So it looks good for pedestrians, but I don't see that either option working for a bike.
Thank you.
Jean Severinghouse, having gone through at least 3 Safe Routes meetings and had the benefit of all the input, I'm really excited that you're pursuing this grant, and I love it as drawn. I love it that your direct connector has slots to go walk your bike up or down. I wouldn't be walking. I'd be taking the ramp. Thank you very much. It's way too steep for me. It's a lot of loose gravel. Neil Cummins School is essentially down kind of at the bottom of it. And so that's really where the requests have been coming from. I think kids coming to Neil Cummings So bravo, thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none, we will bring it back to the BPAC, but Jared, do you want to address anything that you?
Yeah, so I'll talk real briefly. The stair is a stair for peds, and it does have bike runnels on the sides. That's, as Jean mentioned, so you can put your bike on this smooth shoulder, if you will, and you walk up the stairs and you push your bike. Obviously, with a tandem, that is not feasible. So walking a bike up the ramp, if you don't feel comfortable riding it up the ramp, is an option. And then I'm going to look at possibly doing more of a curved switchback approach as opposed to the tight 180 switchback to help address the tightness of the switchback.
Any comments from BPAC? Yes, Kirby.
One is, I think there's a reason why the dirt trails typically follow where society wants to go. And there's a reason why it slopes to the right. Because my guess is, like me, when I've used that a lot and I've never gone up or down to the left. Like, never have I gone that way, but hundreds of times gone that way, or the other way. So it just makes me think, like, yeah, a lot of people want to go that way, and it looks like not the path of least resistance. So, like, maybe people, I don't know, that's just a thought. The other one, the toilet thing is interesting, but it brought to my mind was a water fountain. I use this for jogging when I want to go a longer loop from East Corte Madera. I go do this loop, and if there was a water fountain here, that would be huge, because I actually climb up to what is, for people don't call it primary, if your kid played Twin Cities Little League, they call it Joe Wagner. I hike up to Joe Wagner to get water at the Joe Wagner, and then climb back down. If you want to talk about ADA inaccessible, that slope is not. So a water fountain at that location, if you're doing infrastructure and there is a water pipe nearby. That'd be my vote.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just add one, which is the amount of traffic on that right now is huge. I can just tell you from personal experience. So I'm glad you're really thinking about the design on this, because I think Kirby makes a really good point, which is getting people to adapt to this is going to be difficult. They're going to want to just continue doing what they've been doing. So we're going to have to really make sure it's designed in such a way that it's easier and simpler and better than what they're doing right now, because the amount of traffic, that's the big connector between Corte Madera and Larkspur. So it gets a lot of traffic. But thank you. Okay, next. Looks like Pixley Redwood.
All right, yeah, so the next Safe Pathways grant that we're going to submit on is the improvements at the Pixley / Redwood intersection, just west of town, northwest of Town Park. It's the kind of connection to Neil Cummins as students come along Redwood Avenue and want to cross over Pixley Avenue. So we've had several instances brought to our attention where motorists traveling north on Pixley, making a left onto Redwood, compete with, say, a cyclist heading down Redwood and then crossing the road. We've had reports of speeding, motorists coming south and not having great visibility as they approach this intersection, and then peds crossing Redwood Avenue on the left-hand side of the intersection are difficult with visibility. So we've consulted with Parisi again here and looked at some improvement opportunities. They're pretty basic, but we feel that they're warranted and worthwhile. And mainly, it's the curb bulb outs that you see here. Some additional drainage just to make sure those don't get flooded in the wintertime. Some improved signage at the north side of the intersection. Some vegetation trimming. But yeah, the bulb outs are the primary aspect here, and that's the reduction of the crossing distance for pedestrians getting across the intersection. And we've explored, although it's not captured here, we've explored some striping options here to adding, double yellow center line here to really keep that motorist coming here and traveling further up the road before they make their left onto Redwood Avenue. So this is, at a conceptual level, but something that we're looking at seeking some funding for. And as far as monetary goes, basic intersection improvements, the rough estimate of 150, and we're requesting grant funding for about 2/3 of that for the Safe Pathways Safety Improvement Project. So take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the BPAC?
There's typically cars parked on both sides. I mean, there are driveways. You can see there's a driveway on the northwest side, right there, but typically there's cars parked on both sides of the street there. And so with improvement of what we just talked about on the Hart, I think there'll be more kids going up and down there. And I know that Mill Valley has designated their route on Sycamore as a bicycle boulevard, and I'm wondering if that might be merited in this case, because it does direct people right to the school. And I don't think Corte Madera's had that, but I think it would convey a message to folks to be cautious. It's a park and a school.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the BPAC? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. Any member of the public wish to comment on this project? Okay, hearing none, we'll bring it back to the BPAC for any comments. Any further comments? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to the next item. The High Canal paving.
All right, so this has been discussed quite a bit, and we actually, I'm new here for about a year and a half, so is Peter, my director, but we were able to dig up some little bit more older than us files, or than our term here, and realized that this has been looked at before, and grant funding has been sought in this endeavor, which is there's a current gravel path from Lakeside. So this is a split image here. Basically, this is High Canal, the dark right here, and this is the Lakeside road as it comes through. This is the point of beginning of this path through here. It runs behind these homes out here on Birch. And then, so this is the first of 5 slides. This is the last of 5 slides. So this is how it comes at the end at its termination to Sandra Marker, at least the project termination. The path does continue up to near Redwood High School here, but this is the Sandra Marker Trail. So this is the end, and this is the beginning, and what we're looking at trying to do here is new asphalt where there's existing gravel with a recovery shoulder on each side. So back to my original thought that this had been pursued before, so we're going to have to continue the search there of some hoops to jump through in that all these, I think from an ownership standpoint, this is a drainage easement, a public utility easement back here. And the property lines come up and get real close to the path. So I think there's going to be some discussion with property owners here as far as feasibility of the project. So that has not been done, and right now it's in its infancy again to just seek grant funds as a possible funding allocation for this. So as far as what we've put together here are real conceptual ideas. There's some areas where the path doesn't have enough room as it gets closer to the High Canal. So there's a little bit of a drop off and a retaining wall is needed. So that's of note for cost implications. But speaking of cost, we got a pre-C estimate of about $500,000 to pave the path and put the buffer on the sides, and then the retaining walls there. So the Safe Pathways grant that we're looking at is to cover half of that, and then the town would pick up the other half, so 50% match. So, yeah, I'll take any questions or comments.
Questions from BPAC on this? I have one. Didn't we deal with this a few years ago? And
So-
didn't we have a grant to actually pave this? And didn't we find out that we don't have a public access easement on the path?
So I think you're onto something there, and there has been that discussion before, and we found this
Been doing
out.
this a long time.
That's a small
we,
detail, Bob.
we found this out just a couple days ago after we'd already started looking into it, and we don't want to put it to rest because of that. We want to still pursue it and proceed to see what it takes to get the project moving forward. If it is dead in the water, then we won't, obviously we won't accept the grant funding for it. But you're right, grant funding had been applied for and allocated for the project, and then with the property ownership, it was put to rest, so to speak. The project was.
Because isn't our easement just for accessing the dam or the canal or something?
So we are still trying to look into that as far as exactly the language that is used. At first glance, there's mention of Public Works having full access to the easement as for maintenance, but if there's acquisition of that easement as a possibility, then we would definitely look at all possibilities to make this path a reality.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, then we'll open up for public comment.
Jane Severinghouse. So this is a critical all ages and abilities north-south route through Corte Madera. There's a lot of parents who don't let their kids ride and bike to school because kids have fallen off the embankment here, and it's loose gravel and big mud puddles in the winter. And so parents are actually driving their kids to Neil Cummings, so it would actually really enhance the traffic if we could get this connection made. So kudos to not letting it go. And my memory was something about the problem was that the road for the public works access had to be wider, and somehow that's what the objection was. So I really appreciate your digging in and not letting it go here. Very important all ages and abilities north-south route in Corte Madera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy Winter, I agree with Jean. However, I remember the discussions, and I agree with Bob Ravazio and his skepticism. That's when Barry Hogue, most of the time, was the DPW director. And what I recall, and I may not be accurate, but the conclusion was that all it would take would be one property owner who didn't like cyclists and a whole lot of pedestrians walking past his back fence. That one property owner could file suit and probably win. So I don't like being gloomy, but there's some, I would ask the city council or look through your old files or something. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Jim Robinson, Ash Avenue, Corte Madera. Actually, I'm a bit surprised it's on the agenda. This came before the BPAC and at least over 3 years ago, I guess. And I think the then director at the time said that we need to look at the legal ability of the town to actually do these improvements on the path. History goes even back further than that. When I came to town 22 years ago, there were 2 field trips that Sandra Marker, who was on the council at the time, took me on. One was to the bay side of town to see the Clapper Rail habitat. The other was to look at the High Canal path. And at that time, there was a legal question as to whether or not the town could actually improve that pathway. It came before the town maybe 10 years ago, and the discussion was, well, maybe we ought to consider having a decomposed granite placed on the pathway there. So I'm a bit surprised it's gone but to the safe routes to school, because this is an issue that has long been one that's been brewing in Madera Gardens, and particularly those that back up to to Birch. And a lot of kids that do ride their bikes actually don't use that path in Corte Madera. They come along Lakeside and go along the High Canal path that's already paved. We probably get kids from the east side and base side of town and from Larkspur that use that path. But mostly, because I walk it every day, twice a day, throughout the year, it's mostly used by pedestrians. There are bicyclists that use that. They're not the spandex high-speed bicyclists, but they are the kids that bicycle through there. I guess one of the issues is that because of the canal that's along there, we attempted even to try to clear the brush and vegetation along that path, because throughout much of the year, before the June, I believe it is, before we can actually clear that, it actually narrows down to one lane because of the vegetation. There's a lot of vegetation that's along the backside of those fences that belong to the property owners, and I walked by it the other day again to get my measuring tape out to sort of knowing that this item was on the agenda. And there are actually some places where the neighboring properties have up to 10 to 12 feet of vegetation that would have to be cleared out if they're going to improve this pathway. And I put improve in quotes. I support some sort of decomposed granite. I don't support asphalt paving along the path there. For the reasons that I've stated. And I think that it would be difficult to maintain that path with the expectation you're going to have two lanes, because when you're walking along that path and one or two bicyclists come down there, you almost have to step off that path or into vegetation, particularly during that time of the year where it's not cleared. Again, we have never actually heard a legal opinion. It's been discussed many, many years. Goes back 22 years in my memory. I don't know that that issue has been resolved, so I would hope that that issue would get resolved first. I would also hope that in the future, when they have safe routes to school meetings on topics involving issues in the town of Corte Madera, I think it'd be helpful for those of us who are unaware of their activities, be aware of them so we could attend those meetings. I think they have a link now on the website in the town where they can be aware of that, but as Bob is painfully aware, I attended school board meetings, council meetings, BPAC meetings for over 8 years to get our ADA-approved crosswalk in front of Neil Cummings School. So I think it's always good to communicate with those who are going to be immediately affected by whatever improvements that might occur at the High Canal path. And hopefully we'll get a legal answer so we can know what we can do, so we're not spinning our wheels and start getting everybody's expectations up if there is grant money available to make the improvements. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public comment. Comments from the BPAC?
Not yet.
You have something, Kirby? Go ahead.
Well, actually, I do have a comment, just.
What?
Oh, I do have a comment.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, okay. My recollection when this came up during Barry Hoag's, and when he was Director of Public Works, there were property owners that were adamant not wanting the path paved. And as I recall, part of the objection was they have gates that swing out, and they didn't want people speeding. They assumed that paved path would be, people would be going faster, and and probably a greater volume of people using the path. And I think those were the two objections that I recall. And they were even objected to decomposed granite, which I think even that would be a big improvement.
I love the idea of doing something here. It is a important commuter pathway for local residents. I think it's more of a local resident thing versus a spandex biker thing, but it's an important pathway. I'm really glad to see that you have the property line on here, because hey, I love it when you guys show up. The one meeting I think we had the greatest attendance was from the community was on this topic, and there was a whole lot of people from Birch Avenue that some of them I think even said that their property line extended well beyond what I'm seeing there. Like their impression was the property line went like all the way to the water, and you would just have an easement across our property line. Yeah. That was the impression I got from, I think, some of the community members that live on Birch. So the fact that you have a property line here, I think it's the first time we're seeing that, or the first time I recall seeing that. And I also would comment, I think if we were to do this to the point of there's a lot of residents there have grown plants, my guess is for privacy. And if there was a way we want to make everyone happy, and a path was built, and there's many ways for people to achieve privacy, whether it be fencing or smaller plants, but anyway, I think that should be thought of, because that is probably something they care deeply about, is not having the entire community now looking into their backyard.
Thank you. Any other comments? And I'll just add, Jared, I'm happy to sit with you and Peter. If you want to talk further about it, but I think, yeah, you've got an idea. There's some history here. And just one more thing on the vegetation. There have been complaints. I've also worked with a youth group locally, and there have been complaints because of the vegetation about kids hanging out there at night drinking and smoking and hiding in the vegetation, using it as shelter. So there might be a way to improve things if we can go in and even just trim some of the vegetation. That was discussed at one point, was asking the homeowners, because I do think it is public land. I'm not 100% sure, but you know, it's all over, it's pretty overgrown in spots. So that might even be an improvement if we can go in and, you know, trim back vegetation. So there might be other ways around this, but I think, you know, to make any real improvements, we're gonna have to work with the property owners possibly. So,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. Okay, Pfeiffer bike accident and precautions the town takes to avoid these incidents.
All right, yeah, so this happened, I don't have the exact date, a couple months ago, I want to say. But what happened was around the 200 Nellen Joanne Fabrics, it's this Pfeiffer exit off of 101. The incident occurred for a cyclist traveling eastbound along Pfeiffer here, and currently the property here, as most of you are probably aware, is under construction. A new multi-story office building, mixed use, I believe, is going in here, and there's a PG&E utility trench that was done as part of the new construction, and the contractor. So what happened was the cyclist was traveling in the eastbound direction on the shoulder of the road. There's not a class 2 or class 3. It's a fairly narrow shoulder, but there's also right there where the trench is running. And what had happened is the trench was temporarily patched with an asphalt plug, and that had subsided over I think it was a couple months since they originally did that. And that created a lip, and that lip caught this cyclist's wheel. And yeah, as most of you can imagine, the cyclist went down, and it was pretty serious. So this got brought to our attention, and immediately we picked up the phone and called the contractor and had them address the immediate issue of the lip. We put signage up, uneven pavement, and called as much attention as we could. And then we went and told the contractor that then needed to have permanent patching. So that was the incident that occurred, and we kind of looked at our ways and our permitting and how we can improve that as a result of this. And something that came to mind is the typical application process here is the contractor applies to do the construction, and as part of that, they get an encroachment permit to do a trench in the public right-of-way. And as part of that encroachment permit, we ask for dates of start and finish of construction. So at the start point, they can't enter the road until that date hits, and at the end of the construction window, the road has to be fixed to a perfect permanent standpoint. And that gap in between, we didn't have any regulation on that, and that is really the open window in this incident. So we looked back at, okay, we're going to tighten that up. If you're going to encroach in the right of way, you need to be more selective of your encroachment permit dates. It can't just be the construction window. It has to be the construction in the right of way window, and that permanent T-cut proper trench backfill needs to happen immediately after the trench in the right of way. Not just a temporary pavement plug that will subside over time, and then coming back at the end of the construction project to put the proper pavement on. So over here on the right, if I say the words T-cut and utility trench loosely, but I put a picture here of a proper UCS, Uniform Construction Standard, trench detail here. So a quick little education is the trench this is a cross-sectional view. The pipe or utility runs underground here. This is the trench dug, and in this particular incident, this trench went all the way up to the surface, this real narrow profile here, and a pavement plug was just down here. And that's not permanent trench restoration standards. Permanent trench restoration standards include what we call a T-cut. It's an over-excavation at the top surface, and then another over-excavation at the pavement surface to really get that overlap of asphalt and subgrade material to preclude that subsidence or deflection of the pavement surface. So I just wanted to touch on that. That was requested to bring this to BPAC's attention and talk about the incident, talk about what happened and how DPW responded, and what we are going to be doing in the future to prevent such from happening. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to talk about that.
Any questions from BPAC?
Yeah.
Yes. Kirby.
There was a trench cut in my neighborhood, Madera del Presidio, and it looks exactly like what you described, not that, but exactly like, and it's starting to settle, and as you go down the street, everyone's trying to drive to avoid this trench, so you have cars that are, potentially going to hit each other because people want to avoid the trench. Is that this type of situation?
I'm going to take a note of, do you, an address maybe?
Madera del Presidio.
Just anywhere on it?
Along the main curve as you go over the little bridge.
Okay. I don't know it off the top of my head, that particular trench that you're speaking of, but I'll look into it. You're sure it's not a T-cut restoration that has failed for other reasons? It's a temporary plug?
It looks like a temporary plug because it's about this wide,
Okay.
and the asphalt is now sinking, and
Okay.
in one case, there's a pothole that's emerged.
Okay.
And it's been like that for about a month.
About a month, okay. Have they been doing any construction activity in the area?
Not since they dug it and filled it.
Okay.
Any other questions from BPAC? And we'll open up for public comment. Any public comment on this issue? Okay, hearing none, we'll bring it back to BPAC for comments. Okay, hearing none, then
well,
we,
I just appreciate that Public Works has taken action on this, because I know the person involved, and she was very disturbed, and I don't know if she's writing it anymore, actually. I'll have to ask her.
okay. Yes, thank you for all the work you guys are doing on this stuff. It's important. I know.
Oh, God.
Personal experience, yes. Okay, then we're going to move on to minutes of the April 18th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval. Would you like to move to approve the minutes from April 18th?
Move to approve?
Okay, we have a move.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? None?
Abstain.
Abstain. Mark was not here.
That's right.
And our next meeting date is going to be October 17th, it looks like. Right?
October 17?
Yes. And,
Chairman, can I ask a general question?
yes, if you have one question, go
Just
ahead.
one question, which is, do we have any data yet on the post improvements on, right here outside that corridor here in terms of striping, speed, violations, accidents? Do we have anything yet?
I'll have to check.
I'd like to, yeah.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
What would you say, Bob? How many months? 18 months?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just be very interested in seeing if.
2 years. Yeah, I know we've done some sort of checks on speed and things like
Yeah.
that. Speed is definitely slowed down coming down the hill, which is terrific, so.
That's what I think, but yeah, I'd like to be able to say that a little bit more definitively. But also if there are any, I don't believe there were any accidents, but just, okay.
Certainly, the input from the public has been great about all the crosswalks and the flashing lights and everything has been terrific, so. Okay, with that, we will adjourn the meeting, and thank you all for attending and for your comments this evening. You guys make our meetings. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay.
Most efficient meeting on record.